Episode 15: How to Avoid Being Ghosted and Pivot Your Career.
Being ghosted, at least with respect to the job market, is when you like interview and they're like, yeah, we love you. Like, yeah, we're gonna be in touch, and then you just never hear back from them. That's ghosting. I feel like it's unfortunately very, very common.
Welcome to the Data Nerd Podcast. I'm your host, Nisar Ahmed. Join me as we explore the inner data nerd inside all of us. Dive into the world of data alongside special guests who not only share their wealth of experience and knowledge, but also unveil what truly makes them data nerds. This podcast is brought to you by Business Intelligence. That's BIZNIS Intelligence. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Business Intelligence to stay up to date with Tableau training and the Data Nerd podcast. Connect with me on LinkedIn or stream the Data Nerd podcast across all major podcast platforms. Welcome everyone to the Data Nerd podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Fatemah Mirza to our show today. And we're going to be talking about how to avoid being ghosted and pivot your career. And Fatemah is the perfect person to have on as a guest on this topic. So today, we're going to dive into the job search black hole with Fatemah, who is a certified resume master and influential career expert with over 14 years of hands-on hiring experience. Some of you may be frustrated by getting ghosted after an interview or struggling to pivot your career without taking a pay cut. So Fatemah will share some of her different coaching approaches to help ambitious professionals stop getting ghosted, land the jobs they want, and earn what they deserve. So welcome to the Data Nerd podcast, Fatemah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm Fatemah. I'm the founder of CareerTuners. I started helping just a few of my friends with their applications, and it sort of snowballed from there. And here we are today.
That's great. No, excited to have you on. And before we start, this being the Day Nerd podcast, I do like to ask all my guests this introductory question.
Mhm.
And typically the guests I have on are, in the data analytics field. I know you don't just help data career professionals, you help everybody, right?
That's right.
But this being the Day Nerd podcast, we're kind of focusing on the data aspect. And I wanted to ask you, are you a data nerd? And if so, tell me your story when you realized you were one.
Yeah, I'm definitely a data nerd. I'm actually studying mathematics and computing at UCLA right now. So a lot of my classes are very data science, data engineering heavy. I would say I first realized that I was a data nerd probably like in elementary school, those science fair projects where we had to kind of make everything focused on data, the observable data. And I remember this one experiment that I did. It was so ridiculous. It was so juvenile, but I basically like mixed different pieces of ground up fruit and butter to see
Mhm.
like which juice would absorb the most fat. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, this is the one that promotes weight loss.
So you
So
were into the experimental side of things, right?
I was, but even today, I really, I focus a lot on data. It's how I do all of my decision making at CareerTuners. Data is how I decide who gets promoted and who
Mm.
doesn't, and who gets the most money and all of that good stuff. So yeah, definitely very, very interested in data to this day.
Yeah, I mean, and I've talked to guests before about, regardless of what industry and or what job role you have, making decisions with data is something that you need to do to to get ahead of or be good at your job, right? It's
Absolutely.
very hard to kind of go on a gut feeling. Obviously, you get experience and you go based on your experience, but at the end of the day, you need some data to back up the decisions that you make as well. So, I'm sure that's the same story for you as well.
Exactly. Exactly.
Great. So let's talk about some of your experience, right? Can you share a bit about your career journey and what led you to become a certified resume master and career expert?
Yeah, so like I said, I initially started just by helping a few friends of mine with their resumes, just based on what I knew would work. Like, hey, this sounds like good writing, this doesn't sound like good writing, that kind of thing. Um, It snowballed from there, you know, through word of mouth. I became a certified resume master within that year, and I started getting more interest in my services than I can handle. So I hired my first employee, I believe in, well, like I was working with a couple of freelancers as early as 2012, but my first full-time employee in 2014, and now we have more than 30 full-time employees at CareerTuners, and we've helped more than 3,500 customers, mostly from the tech and data fields.
Oh, nice. So most of your customers are in the data related field.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So is that something that was that on purpose, or did you just find that most people in that field are the ones who need help in this area?
I think it's geographical. I live in Southern California. I'm based out of Irvine, and I feel like a lot of the jobs out here are related to tech in some way. There's a
Yeah.
lot of medical device and health companies here, so a lot of their data professionals, a lot of their tech professionals do use our services. So yeah, I think it's purely geographical. It was purely accidental, and of course, my personal interest in the space I think have contributed to me being able to help those kinds of professionals. Yeah.
So has that changed though, now that you see remote work being more apparent now, that you're not just focused on California, you take clients from or customers from across the country?
Oh, I do. I do for sure. I do serve customers from everywhere. It's just based on like Google search and like
Gotcha.
LinkedIn and stuff like that. I tend to just, I get a lot of and California is a really big job market, right? Like
Of
there's
course.
just a lot of people here. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I'm in the New York area. I'm sure there's a lot of people from the New York area as well who also
Hmm.
use services. It's kind of a same, I wouldn't say New York's the same as California, but I'd say it's the East Coast equivalent of, the Silicon Valley East, right?
Right, right, right.
Good. So when we're talking about being ghosted, okay, let's first start off with what does it mean? What is being ghosted? Like when we talk about being ghosted, what is that for those who may not know what ghosted is?
Being ghosted, at least with respect to the job market, is when you like interview and they're like, yeah, 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 we love you. Like, yeah, we're gonna be in touch, and then you just never hear back from them. That's ghosting. I feel like it's unfortunately very, very common. If you're talking about like the resume black hole, that's when you like don't even get a response. Like you just don't even get that interview stage. So unfortunately, both are pretty common, especially with the layoffs that we're seeing, with the right sizing that we're seeing post COVID, right?
Yeah, I think now it's probably more apparent than it was, I'd say, what was it, 2021, where it was kind of the reverse, where
Mm,
it was the candidates had the upper hand, right? That they were looking
right.
for people. And so did you find that ghosting at that time was less apparent than it was now?
No, I think people ghost like it's just something that people do. Like unfortunately, it's just
Mm,
easier than setting up your simple like HRM solution if you even able to do like automated
yeah.
rejections. People are just crappy people. Like that's unfortunately the nature of the world. And
Yeah,
yeah, it's not comfortable to reject people. It does open you up to liabilities. So
that's true. Yeah. I guess they're trying to not get into trouble, and that's it's easier to ghost than to open themselves up to potential
yeah, yeah,
lawsuits, I guess.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, okay, so then let's talk about the candidates, right?
Hmm.
Ghosting happens. It's not
Hmm.
under our control, right? There's not
Hmm.
much we could do, but there may be some common mistakes that you see professionals make in their job
Hmm.
search that lead them to be ghosted, right?
Hmm.
And so what are
Hmm.
some of those common mistakes?
Well, if you're not even getting like responses at all, then probably what's happening is you're not answering something in the job application in some way. Usually, if you're getting like automated rejections, it's probably because your resume isn't applicant tracking system optimized. Like you have the wrong keywords, or you have a lot of like graphics on your resume, or there's some kind of formatting issue that's making it illegible and difficult to parse. That's happening. Or if you're not getting automated rejections, but you still don't hear back, it's because you're not you're not making the case for yourself as compared to other applicants. Like there isn't enough discussion of the ROI that you bring to the table. your resume doesn't have enough accomplishments, you seem underqualified or overqualified. Um, you're using a lot of technical jargon that's outdated, it's not relevant to their hiring needs, or, someone who's maybe non-technical, who's going through that initial screening, they're not able to decipher like what it is that you can actually contribute.
Got you. So optimizing your resume so that you can kind of get through to the recruiter
Right.
is something that you help out with, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
But ghosting happens even like let's suppose you do get through a recruiter and then you
Mm,
have a meeting and you talk with them with the initial interview. Ghosting
mm,
happens after that stage as well.
yeah.
Even after the recruiter, sometimes you may even meet some of the team or the hiring manager and you
Right.
get ghosted as well. So there's different stages at which you can get ghosted. And so is like how can you prevent or can you prevent that from happening?
In some situations, no. I feel like you kind of have to accept that that's just the unfortunate reality of the job market. Some people are going to ghost you because they decided later that they really didn't have the budget to hire somebody, or they decided later that they wanted to keep that position in-house and like, promote someone internally, or um the person who was responsible for making that decision resigned, or whatever. Like there's some bureaucratic
Yeah.
issue that's not allowing you to proceed further with your candidacy. Another reason you could be getting ghosted is that you're like a really bad interviewer, or third, they could just be interviewing you to get you to do some work or share some IP for free, and
Uh,
then when they get what they want, they can be like, okay.
that's a good point
Yeah.
because that's free. Basically, it's like free consulting services, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
reach out to somebody to like, oh, there's a job. Are you interested? Let's do an interview. Here's a case study. Give me your, uh, what are your thoughts on that? Like those case study type of interviews. Is should we shy away from doing those or like is that a red flag?
I feel like there are companies that should be able to get away with it. Like if you're an upper tier employer and you are if you're like Google or whatever and you're
Yeah.
using this kind of screening to narrow the applicant pool. Like yeah, that to me makes somewhat more sense. I personally would never do it as an employer. Like I would always pay somebody for their time even if they do a horrible job. Um it's just not something that I'm personally comfortable with, but I can see why like companies that are very competitive and get a lot of candidates would do something like that. And they're not going to act unethically. Like I mean, not that they're not going to act unethically, but I can't imagine Google being like, "Oh, hey, we should get into like the automated I don't know, blender business. Let's hire a data analyst. Let's pretend
Yeah.
to hire a data analyst from the automated blender business and get intel on what their market looks like and then ghost them." Like I can't really imagine Google doing something like that. So, I think kind of looking at the company's reputation, then making an educated guess about like, hey, is this something that I'm going to be taken advantage of, or not, and then kind of proceeding accordingly is the best way forward.
So what if you're interviewing with a startup and then they give you a case study? Then that might be more of a red flag, right? And
Yeah, yeah, I have done that. I have put together a case study for a startup and I did move forward. It was for like a director of marketing position. I did move very late into the application, and then later they were like, "Sorry, like we don't want to hire you because of lack of qualifications." I'm like, "You knew this when you first saw my resume. You didn't need to make me do a 14-hour case study for this." So, I don't like it, but I think it's unfortunate. You just have to play the game, you know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, so I've done interviews, right? I've interviewed people for jobs.
Mm,
I've never given out a case study. I typically like to talk to people in the interview, and I can kind of get a good gauge based on the way that they're talking to you, if they know what they're talking about, right? And
right.
also, if they give you a link to their portfolio and then you can see their work, then that goes a long way. And then you don't really necessarily need to do a case study. But I do see why case studies are beneficial, but at the same time, some people take advantage of that, right? So I think
Absolutely.
you need to be a little bit wary whenever that arises or that situation.
Yeah. I personally really like assigning case studies, but I always compensate for them. I'm always like, listen, if you
Yeah.
can't, do this, then no hard feelings or whatever. But I really like them for roles that I don't have much knowledge of. Like, for example, if I was hiring like an SEO person. Like I don't have that
Mm.
much knowledge of SEO. I might ask them to put together like an audit of our website and just kind of explain it to me. And I'd be like, okay, that kind of makes sense. Like allowing people to do that level of homework and kind of showing off, I think it's a chance for them to also shine.
Yeah.
But yeah, in an ideal world, they would all be compensated.
Yeah, so if I'm somebody who knows, like if I'm doing the interview and I'm giving a case study on a topic that I know nothing about, then
Mm,
essentially you're getting free, uh, you're getting work done for free, right? Because now you
right.
somebody who may be an expert in that field, and they're giving you their professional services for something that you may need help in, right?
Absolutely.
So okay, so we talked about being ghosted, right? And
Hmm.
whether you know you talk about more reputable companies, and perhaps it may be easier, may be less of a red flag to go down that path,
Hmm.
right? Um, let's shift to somebody who may want to pivot into a new career,
Mm,
okay? And let's talk about um salaries, okay?
mm,
Not what salaries. Well, actually, if you're okay, let's suppose you want to get into data analytics, for example. You're not
right.
working in analytics. So I teach an analytics class, and most of my students are working professionals. They're just not working in data analytics, but they want to
Hmm.
get into it. And so I teach them how to get into it. And a lot of them already have some experience, and they have data that they can work with, and they can easily shift into data analytics.
Hmm.
Like we said, all most decisions are made with data, right? So most
Right.
our people are working with data. So some people may create opportunities or create jobs for themselves in the role that they currently exist, or they may try to interview for new roles.
Hmm.
Now, you're trying to shift your position, right? You're moving from um, a position where you're in marketing, and then now you become want to become a marketing analyst or a data analyst,
Hmm.
right? Somebody who's trying to pivot into a career or into a different field,
Hmm.
okay? Should they accept a lower salary um, because they don't have that experience, or what strategies would you recommend in that situation?
Yeah, if you're not willing to take on a lower salary, you really have to be able to show with a lot of confidence that you're worth the additional buck. And the the most believable way to execute that is with experience. If you don't have that experience, you have to manufacture it in some way. You have to take experience that you do have and showcase instances when you were able to use data analysis in order to, make things better.
Mm,
Maybe you made things faster, maybe you solved a specific technical issue, maybe you made things cheaper, etc. Show them that you brought ROI with that specific skill, because then you are, you know, you're showing experience even if you don't have that formal job title. And you want to do this in your resume, you want to do this when interviewing, you want to do this on your LinkedIn, everything. Everywhere where you're communicating what you can do, you want to make sure it's focused around that brand. Um, and if you are going into interviews, you have to be able to speak a language in a way that makes sense to your interviewer. If you come from a marketing background and you're primarily talking about like web analytics, blah, 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 but you're
yeah,
interviewing for like a healthcare analytics role,
yeah.
that's going to make them uneasy. They're going to pigeonhole you. They're going to want to justify paying you less. So you want to use language that they're going to be comfortable with. Any certifications that you can take in, let's say, like HIPAA compliance and how to do data analysis that's in line with any state regulations that may impact that company. Showing using that language in your interview answers is going to put them at ease. It's going to show them that you're not totally out of depth, and they're gonna be able to justify paying you more. So that's what you want to do. You want to brand yourself well, and you want to speak that language.
So even if you don't have the experience, like in your example, if you want to get into healthcare and you worked in marketing before, people who have that experience will have an upper hand because
Mm,
they've worked in it. But if you want to get into so my I'm in healthcare right now, but I've only been in healthcare for like 5, 6 years. Before that, I was never into healthcare.
mm,
What got me into it was not my healthcare experience, it was my technical knowledge, right?
right.
And so can that compensate for the lack of knowledge in the industry or it,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like, if you are running into instances where people are ghosting you, where you feel like maybe my experience is kind of not putting them at ease, then you definitely should probably think about like taking a certification and adjusting your vocabulary, like developing that knowledge base and using that in, in your interview answers.
Hmm.
But if you're so experienced and accomplished and it's just a matter of you changing industries, but your function is going to be the same, like I
Yeah.
wouldn't consider that like starting from scratch. You know what I mean?
Right. So would candidates have to professionals have to rebrand themselves? Is that what they, to stand out from
Yeah, yeah. If you're trying to make any sort of transition, like you definitely have to rebrand yourself. You definitely have to, because I mean it's a fast-paced world. Like people aren't gonna, give you the benefit of the doubt and make excuses for hiring you. They're gonna try to make their life easier. They're gonna go with the candidate that seems to have the most experience, but that's asking for the least pay. So you have to make it easy for people who are skimming, who are just barely paying attention in the interview. They're just looking for like the keywords that they're looking for. You have to make it easy for them to understand that no, you are very qualified. You do have the required skill set, and you have to fake that until you make it. Not in terms of like making up experience, but you have
yeah.
to kind of have that air of confidence that no, look, I have this skill. Don't undermine yourself in the interview. Use language in your resume that it makes sense, it's accurate, but it's in line with your with their hiring needs. And you have to be able to come into that with that confidence. That I think branding yourself is really, really critical.
So how do you rebrand yourself? Like, is it just in the interview, or do you have to completely revamp your resume?
Yeah, I would revamp your resume completely. You just want to take like a job description that you're interested in, and kind of reverse engineer your resume based on that. Like there
Mm.
shouldn't be anything on there that is going to take away from this first impression that they're getting of, oh, this is a data science professional. The minute they're like, oh, this person was in sales, like they're going to use that to justify
Yeah,
paying you less. You know
gotcha.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean like you delete experiences from your resume, because that might open up gaps, employment gaps, which is like another big issue. But you want to word things in a way where you're highlighting, like if you worked at Starbucks,
Yeah.
you don't want to talk about like how you were customer oriented and you know, you were serving this many drinks or whatever. Like that's not relevant to their hiring needs. You want to keep it focused on what their hiring needs are.
So you only want to keep experience on your resume that's relevant to the job, right? If Starbucks is on there, it's not going to help you get that job, so it's better to leave it off.
No, not necessarily. If it opens up some kind of like, let's say like you're a fresh graduate, you just
Mm.
got out of school and you worked at the university parking garage and you were like a parking attendant. Your ability to work 20-hour job per week, go to school full time, handle large amounts of cash, have that level of work ethic and stuff. Like it's still valuable. I just wouldn't be like, I was able to park 20 cars per hour. Like I wouldn't
Yeah.
focus on that. I would focus on, well, what is it about this experience that makes it valuable to someone who's hiring a data analyst? Well, I worked a lot of hours. I worked 20 hours per week while balancing a full course load. I would mention that. I would
Yeah.
mention that like I'm trustworthy by saying, okay, I handled up to $3,000 per day in cold hard cash. These are the things that you would want to talk about on your resume. So you have to put a filter through it. And if honestly, if you're struggling, use ChatGPT. Say, look, I was a parking attendant and now I want to become a data
Yeah.
analyst.
Yeah.
What are
Because you
some of the
can,
skills that I can play up? And it'll create some bullets for you that you can then tweak to match your exact experience.
using ChatGPT is not cheating, right? It's just a tool that will help you um, get what you want, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So let's talk about this job search black hole.
Hmm.
Right? So what is a job search black hole, and how do job seekers avoid falling into it?
So it's literally the exact same thing that I was mentioning earlier when you're applying and you're just not hearing back, right? So if that's happening to you, it's because your resume is not making the screening. You don't have the required keywords, or your resume it's like too graphic heavy. There's something off in terms of the formatting. It's not parsable, or you just don't come across as very competitive as compared to the other candidates that they're applying against. And you want to kind of focus on your data science accomplishments in that case.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, what about salary negotiation when it comes to applying for jobs? Like, do you have any like strategies on like the best way to negotiate salary? I know typically people get a higher salary increase when they leave their company for another company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you think that's the best route? I mean, I guess it depends on what people want. Is it really the money or experience, right? But when it
Right.
comes to negotiating salaries, can you talk about that from your experience and kind of some of the best practices there?
Yeah, the worst thing you can do in terms of your salary is not negotiating, right? Like if you accept the first number that you hear, that's the worst thing you can do. And if someone rejects your entire candidacy based on you trying to ask for like 5 to 10% more, that's not a good company for you to join long term anyway. Um, so that's the worst thing you can do. The best thing you can do is be informed of what's going on with that specific role. So there's a lot of forums that you can join where people will talk about the salary offers that they're getting based on the location and the role and the tier of that job. So gathering that data and then making educated guesses based on your location and the title that you're interviewing for is going to be critical. I always tell people to have like a couple numbers in mind. The first number is, look, this is the number that no matter what, I will accept, right? I
Yeah.
don't care what they're asking me to do. If they're going to pay me like $3 million a year, like
Yeah.
whatever the number is, you have that number. And then you have um, what you're currently making plus 20%. That's like, that's typically how much you should be aiming for if you're changing positions.
Okay.
Your walkaway number, like I am absolutely not going to accept anything lower than this. And then everything in between, you have to make if this, then that kind of,
Yeah.
scenarios where if they're giving me the absolute lowest salary that, I would walk away otherwise, their insurance better be really good. They better be giving me 4 weeks off paid,
Mm.
like
Yeah.
making that list, having a very like data informed approach to salary negotiation is critical because it feels really emotional. It feels like you're like, okay, I'm telling somebody that I'm worth this much money. And that's like a really icky feeling to have. But just boiling it down into numbers makes the process so much more objective. And then anytime you get an offer, don't accept it. Just say, let me think about it. And then you can think about it, look at your spreadsheet of numbers, marinate, and get back to them via email.
So are you saying unless they give you that number that you said that said if this is what they're offering you, you're taking it. Other
Mhm.
than that, you should always negotiate
Yes, absolutely.
because now when you apply for jobs, in most jobs, at least in New York, and I think it's in California too, have the salary range in their job description, right?
Yeah, but some of them are so ridiculous. They're like, yeah, we're gonna
It's a huge
pay you
range.
50 to 100,000. Like, okay, that range is like 100%. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
what are you
yeah.
going to do with this information? It's not useful at all. So you have to go beyond that. It's just not useful information. You have to look at forums. You have to look at people talking online. You have to talk to your friends about how much money they're making. And that's a sensitive conversation, but simply being like, look, I'm getting offers for, 110. Like, do you feel like that's reasonable given my experience? People will start volunteering. They'll be like, well, I make 140. And this is why. It's because I have a master's degree. And you can then figure out like, okay, if I wanted to do this and that, this is what I
Wait,
would do.
should you tell them how much you're making?
Well, not the person you're interviewing with, but your
Oh, okay.
friends for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Like if you
Okay.
have friends
No,
in the data science space,
but in the interview process, you should never tell them how much you're currently making.
no, it's illegal for them to ask in the United States, in most states.
Yes, they wouldn't ask, but should you volunteer that number and say as part of your salary negotiation?
You most likely have signed an NDA and are probably not even at liberty to disclose what you're currently making. So I would strongly caution you against that.
Okay. But when you're applying for jobs, a lot of the jobs applications ask you what salary you're looking for, right?
Right.
And so what if they come back and give you that number?
So I would never actually list a proper number. Like if the field, you can only submit the form such that you're inputting a numerical value, I would
Yeah.
put like $5.
Okay.
Something ridiculous where they're like, okay, well, the rest of her application looks good. Like, let's just have a conversation with her and see where this goes. I wouldn't ever actually put like, I'm interested in X amount of money.
If they see that, would they dismiss you and say, "Oh, they didn't put a proper salary, and then we're not going to consider it as candidate?"
I think that would be very unlikely. Obviously, they could, but really, I mean, is that the kind of company that you want to work for where they're
That's
like,
true.
I'm sorry, you know, this is we're just not going to hire you because you didn't input like,
Yeah.
or you if it's an option, you can say I'm willing to discuss like acceptable ranges based on the the nature of the job, but if they're only allowing numerical values, just put like $5.
Yeah. 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 So in the data analytics space, right? So I'm seeing, I'm not applying for jobs. I'm not looking for jobs,
Hmm.
but I'm just hearing based on some of the students who I teach who are looking for jobs. It's very competitive.
Yeah,
Like you have and I think it's due to the layoffs that happen where you have
yeah,
so many people in the market now who have that experience, and now they're competing against, or people or new hires are not have to compete against them, right? So
yeah.
like what advice can you give to people who may not have that same level of experience but want the job, or like how, like what can they do to kind of get a leg up and be considered for those positions?
Well, definitely you want to make sure you're branding yourself well, right? Like your resume and everything has to be on point. In addition to that, coming in with a referral really does help. And if you're not very well connected, you don't have any connections in this space, messaging hiring managers and recruiters that recruit specifically for professionals like you with like just a sweet little, hey, if you know of any opportunities that require my skill set, we have found that that has really had an impact. We have a service where we do this for our clients, where we log into their LinkedIn profiles and reach out to different hiring managers and different executives in that space. So, say for
Mm.
example, if you're in data science,
Yeah.
the executive who would be, budgeting to hire someone like you would be what, like a chief information officer, a chief technology officer, or whatever.
Yeah.
So just do you know of any companies that are hiring people like me? That has had like a tremendous impact in terms of the number of interviews you get. So if you're just not hearing back, taking things kind of in your own hands, not just reaching out to the people that are posting jobs, but people who hire in general
Mm.
is a way that you can get jobs that haven't even been posted online.
Because at the end of the day, what's the worst that can happen from reaching out to people, right? They won't respond. I mean, there's really not much you can lose from at least giving it a shot, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So can you share some of those success stories that you may have had from your coaching practice, or where someone turned their job search around with your guidance?
Yeah, I actually have a ton. If you go to my website, CareerTuners.com, and check out the case studies page, I have them organized actually by industry. So you can check out some of the other data science professionals that have helped. But just to throw a name out there, there was a client that we had named Nate. He was a recent graduate and he was a career changer and he was looking for his first job in this space.
Yeah.
But his resume was off brand. It didn't really focus on data engineering or any of that. And it didn't have accomplishments related to that either. So we just redid it completely and he got a job as a data engineer two, the rank two at Microsoft. So he did end up getting the job that he wanted and he got it really quickly.
That's great. It must be very fulfilling to do what you do, right? To help people, and then once they get the job that they want, it makes you feel good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. Most recently, I actually started helping a local women's shelter. There's
Mm.
uh, there's
Yeah.
women that need to get a job ASAP. Otherwise they can have their custody issues. There's all kinds of stuff. So it's really gratifying helping people who are looking for technical jobs and are looking to move up, but it's even more gratifying to be able to have the type of job where I can also further donate my knowledge and donate my time to
Mm.
those who really, really need it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that's very gratifying to me.
Yeah, no, I could imagine. That's great. Also, I think, and I'm sure you've encountered this, where
Hmm.
people are here on a student visa, or they need to, or they get laid off and they have, I don't know, so how many X amount of days to find another job, or else they have to leave the country. That's a
Yeah,
very challenging situation, right? A
absolutely.
very high stress situation.
Absolutely. There was a client of mine who he was gay and he was terrified of being sent back home because he was like, look, if I go home, they're gonna lynch me. I'm not gonna be okay. And being able to help someone like that was really, really gratifying because again, in some cases, like it is life-changing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. No, so can you um tell our listeners where they can reach out to you, what best way to reach out to you, or maybe your website, and can they connect with you on LinkedIn as well?
Absolutely. You can send me a connection. My name is Fatemah Mirza. It's spelled with an E, so Fatemah and Mirza. Or you can look me up at CareerTuners.com. And the very first button on our homepage, you can schedule a call with my team and get some advice on your specific career situation.
Perfect. I'll put both those links up in the notes for the podcast. So if anyone needs to reach out to Fatima, that is available to you. So great. Thanks, Fatima. This was a great discussion, and hopefully this will help people out. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it was great having you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated all of your experience and insights.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fatima.